The desert slept beneath a bruised sky, a silence so deep it could swallow prayers whole. Wind moved like an old ghost across the plains, dragging whispers of dust that clung to everything too stubborn to die. The sun hadn't risen yet, but its promise bled along the horizon, a thin, trembling wound of gold. Nothing here was young. The rocks had faces, the cacti stood like witnesses. Even the wind felt tired, like it had been carrying the same sorrow for 100 years. Far off, a hawk circled over bones the color of moonlight, and the earth below waited without breath, without sound, without hope. This was the kind of land that remembered pain. Every grain of sand carried the echo of something lost, a cry, a prayer, a footstep that never made it home. The mesas rose like altars to forgotten gods, their red spines catching the dawn's first blood. Between them stretched miles of emptiness, cracked and dry as the hearts of those who once loved and left beneath this sun. A lone horse broke the horizon, its shape small against the sweep of the earth. The man on its back rode slow, steady, not chasing anything, not running either. Just moving, because stopping meant remembering. His hat was pulled low, his coat dusted with the same color as the land. The rifle tied to his saddle wasn't for hunting anymore, it was a relic, like him. Something that once meant protection, now just a shadow of purpose. He guided the horse toward the riverbed that hadn't held water since spring. The earth there was cracked in patterns like old scars, each one telling stories of rain that once mattered. The man looked down, saw his reflection in a patch of shallow mud, and for a moment didn't recognize it. The eyes were too tired, the beard too wild, the soul too quiet. A storm had passed here days ago, leaving behind the smell of wet iron and ash. Scattered along the sand were remnants, a feather, a broken shell, a ribbon half buried in the dust. The man's gaze lingered on that ribbon. Faded blue, torn at the edge. Something human about it. Something wrong. He dismounted, boots sinking into the soft earth. The world around him waited, even the wind paused, listening. He crouched, fingers brushing the ribbon gently, as if afraid it might vanish. For the first time in months, his heart remembered how to beat with purpose. Behind him, thunder murmured low against the mountains, not of rain, but of fate rolling closer. The sky broke open, light spilling like mercy across the desert. The wind carried the scent of smoke, and somewhere, far off, where the river once ran, came a faint, broken sound. Not wind. Not an animal. A human cry. He followed the sound like a man chasing a memory, slow, cautious, afraid of what he might find. The air had turned still, the kind of stillness that made even the sky hold its breath. Each step pressed into damp sand, each echo swallowed by the vastness around him. Near the bend of the dry riverbed, he saw her. She was lying half-hidden beneath a fallen juniper, her body tangled in roots and dust, one arm draped across the earth as though she'd reached for it before falling. Her dress, torn, travel-worn, bore the color of ash and earth. Blood had dried at her temple, streaking down like war paint that time forgot. A single beaded necklace lay broken beside her, its last thread clinging to her skin. The man stopped, every part of him pulled tight, not from fear, but reverence. The desert had shown him many things, bones, bandits, graves marked with stones. But never this, never life so close to leaving. He dropped to one knee. His shadow covered her face like a prayer. He didn't speak. Words felt wrong out here. Instead, he reached for his canteen, unscrewed the cap, and tipped it gently toward her lips. A tremor ran through her, breath-catching, fragile but real. Water spilled across her chin, and she coughed once, twice, eyes fluttering open. They were dark, deep as wet earth, wild as the storm that had left her here. He waited, letting her eyes find the world again. When she tried to move, pain folded her back into the dust. He laid a steady hand against her shoulder, not holding her down, just telling her without words, "You're safe now." Her gaze drifted to the rifle slung across his saddle, then to the worn cross tied to the leather reins, a token, faded and cracked. She didn't ask. He didn't offer. The desert didn't need stories, it only dealt in survival. He tore a strip from his coat sleeve, pressed it to the wound at her brow. Her breath hitched, then steadied. He could feel her pulse faint and uncertain beneath his fingers, like something fragile deciding to stay. When she slipped into sleep, he lifted her carefully, arms strong but slow, afraid the motion might break her all over again. Her head rested against his chest, the weight almost holy in its stillness. The horse shifted as he approached, sensing the change, one more life to carry. He laid her across the saddle, covering her with his poncho. The wind rose again, stirring the dust, whispering something ancient between them. He didn't know her name, her story, or what ghosts followed her here. But as he turned toward the horizon, back toward the lonely cabin tucked beneath the red cliffs, the sky broke wide and bright above them. For the first time in years, he rode toward something other than silence. The cabin sat low against the red cliffs, half swallowed by sagebrush and thyme. Its roof creaked in the wind, its walls carried the smell of cedar smoke and old solitude. Inside, the light was thin, firelight trembling against rough-hewn wood, painting the air in gold and shadow. He laid her on his bedroll, near the stove's slow warmth. The silence between them was wide, but not empty, the kind that listened. Outside, the wind spoke through the chinks in the wall, its voice steady, like a lullaby only the desert could hum. She slept for 2 days. He kept the fire alive, tending it the way a man might tend a fragile promise. Sometimes he talked to it, soft, almost without sound, because talking to her still felt like trespassing. He'd set water to boil, clean her wound, replace the bandage. When she stirred, he turned away, giving her space to wake without fear. The third morning, she sat up. Her hand went to her head, to the necklace he'd gathered bead by bead from the riverbed and placed beside her pillow. She touched it once, a quiet recognition, then looked toward him. No words. Just a slow nod. He cooked beans in an iron pot, the smell filling the small room. When he slid the tin plate toward her, she hesitated, then took it. She ate in silence. He didn't watch her, but he noticed the way her shoulders dropped, not relaxed, just less ready to flee. That evening, he fixed the broken chair that leaned near the hearth. Each scrape of the knife against wood echoed like a heartbeat. She watched from the corner, wrapped in his blanket, eyes following his hands. When the chair stood again, sturdy, simple, he placed it near the fire, gestured for her to sit. She did. He poured her more water. That was the first time her lips almost formed a smile. Days passed. The rhythm grew, quiet, measured. He'd fetch water from the spring, she'd fold the blanket by the fire. He'd patch the window, she'd hum beneath her breath, the sound soft and strange and beautiful, like something remembered from before the world went cruel. One night, a storm rolled across the mesa. Rain drummed on the roof, thunder shook the glass jars lining the shelf. She startled, hand trembling. He moved to the window, closed the shutters tight, then lit another lamp. "Storm's short," he said, the first words he'd spoken in days. His voice was low, worn smooth by years of silence. She looked at him then, not with fear, but with knowing, as if she'd waited to hear it. He sat across from her. Between them, the fire cracked open another small piece of darkness. And for the first time, the cabin didn't feel empty. It felt alive. The days stretched slow, stitched together by silence and firelight. The desert outside began to soften, rains came, brief and shy, brushing green across the mesas. But inside the cabin, the air stayed heavy with unspoken things. He found her by the doorway one dusk, tracing her fingers along the beads of her necklace. He'd mended the string with a strip of rawhide, though one bead, the largest, was cracked clean through. She held it like it was breathing. When he looked closer, he saw it wasn't just a bead, it was carved bone, smoothed with age and oil. She noticed his gaze and said, softly, "My brother made it. Before they came." She didn't explain who they were. She didn't have to. The silence that followed carried the shape of loss, sharper than words could make it. Her eyes drifted toward the horizon through the open door, the land stretching endless and cruel, and then she turned away, shoulders closing like a gate. Later that night, while the fire whispered low, she found him cleaning his rifle. The metal caught the orange glow, worn, dented, cared for like something that had seen too much. His sleeve had written up, and beneath the grime she saw a thin white scar curling along his wrist, disappearing beneath the fabric. She didn't ask, but he noticed her looking. His hand stilled. "It was the war," he said simply. "I lost more than I meant to." His eyes lifted, quiet, steady, but full of distance. "Faith don't come back easy after that." He set the rifle down, leaned back against the wall. For a moment, the fire between them dimmed, then flared again, throwing light on the bead at her throat and the scar on his wrist, twin marks of survival, born from different battles. She spoke after a while. "They took everything," she said, barely above the sound of the rain tapping the roof. "My tribe, the ones who lived scattered like wind. I ran east, but the world only got emptier." She turned the broken bead in her fingers, voice steady but hollow. "I buried the rest in the sand." He looked at her, not with pity, but recognition. He reached for the kettle, poured her a cup of coffee gone lukewarm, and pushed it across the table. A simple gesture, yet something shifted, a bridge made not from words but from quiet mercy. The night deepened. Outside, coyotes sang like they were calling names the earth had forgotten. She touched the bead again. He rubbed his wrist. Two souls sitting in the glow of the same small fire, both branded by what they'd lost, both too tired to keep running. In the faint flicker of the flames, their shadows leaned together, two ghosts learning, slowly, to be human again. The warning came on the wind, a distant thrum, deep and steady, like thunder riding low across the plains. He was outside splitting kindling when the sound reached him. Not weather. Hooves. More than one. She stepped out onto the porch, shawl pulled tight, eyes narrowing toward the rising dust. The air tasted of iron and distance, the kind of silence that came before trouble. He set the axe down, slow, listening. 6 riders, maybe 7. Soldiers by the rhythm. Not the kind that passed by without reason. He looked toward her, she didn't move, didn't ask. She already knew. The desert had taught her how danger sounded. He went inside, pulled the rifle from its place by the door. She followed, silent as shadow. "They're looking for someone," he said, voice low, half to himself. "Always are." Her hand drifted to her necklace, the broken bead gleaming faintly in the light. Her jaw set. "They came through the canyon 2 weeks ago," she whispered. "Took women. Burned what was left." The words trembled but didn't break. "If they see me," he didn't let her finish. He grabbed his old coat, threw it over her shoulders, hiding the torn fabric and the beads. "Get inside," he said. She shook her head once, defiant, but the look in his eyes stopped her. Not command. Protection. He moved to the window, heart pounding slow and steady. The riders came into view, gray coats, guns slung easy, dust clinging to their mouths. The lead man raised a hand. "Rancher," he called. "We're tracking a runaway, Indian woman. Dangerous." He didn't answer right away. The woman stood behind the half-open door, breath shallow, every inch of her poised between flight and faith. The soldiers dismounted, boots crunching against gravel. The one in front stepped closer, face hard beneath his hat. "You seen anyone pass through?" The cowboy met his gaze, steady. "Ain't seen a soul in weeks." The man studied him. "Mind if we look around?" He hesitated, a heartbeat too long. Then, "You're standing on private land." It wasn't much of a threat, but it was enough. The soldier smirked, spat into the dust. Suit yourself. He turned, swung back onto his horse. If you see her, you send word. There's money in it. They rode off, their shapes swallowed by the glare of the horizon. The wind filled the silence they left behind, soft and ragged. He waited until they were gone, then stepped back inside. She was by the fire, clutching the coat to her chest. You lied for me, she said. He shrugged, but his voice caught. Didn't feel like a lie. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, two fugitives of different kinds, bound now by a choice that couldn't be undone. Outside, the dust settled back to stillness, but the air inside the cabin burned with something fragile and fierce. He'd chosen her. And in doing so, he'd chosen everything he'd once sworn to forget. The night came soft and slow after the riders left. The air smelled of rain again, faint, but hopeful. Inside the cabin, the fire had burned low, leaving only the kind of light that made the world feel smaller, safer. She sat near the hearth, mending his torn sleeve. The same sleeve he'd ripped weeks ago to bandage her head. Her hands worked carefully, the motion steady, almost sacred. He watched her in silence, the way he had learned to, without asking, without intruding. Every stitch pulled something invisible back together. When she finished, she set the shirt aside and reached for the bead necklace on the table. He'd cleaned it earlier, strung it on new twine, his fingers clumsy but patient. Now, in her hands, it looked whole again, not perfect, but whole. She studied it, eyes bright with something more than gratitude. You fixed it, she said softly. He nodded once. Figured it had more right to stay than most things. For a long time, neither spoke. The fire popped, sending sparks like stars into the dim room. Then she stood, stepped closer, and slipped the necklace over his wrist, the broken bead resting against his old scar. Now it's ours, she whispered. He froze, breath catching in his throat. The small weight of the bead was nothing, but it burned like truth. He looked up, met her eyes. There was no fear there anymore, just calm, and the reflection of the flame between them. He reached out, brushed a stray strand of hair from her cheek. His hand trembled, rough against her skin, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned into it, eyes closing for a heartbeat that stretched too long and not long enough. You don't have to be alone anymore, he said. The words came quiet, almost unsure, as though he was saying them for both of them. She smiled, a small, tired thing, but it reached her eyes. Neither do you. Outside, the wind had gone still, the desert holding its breath. Somewhere far off, thunder rolled, gentle this time, not warning, but promise. He stoked the fire one last time, added a log, then sat beside her on the floor. They didn't speak again. They didn't need to. Her head found his shoulder, his hand found hers. The rhythm of their breathing matched the crackle of the flames. Two broken souls, bound by silence, warmed by something that had no name, something larger than forgiveness, smaller than forever. When sleep finally came, it came soft. And for the first time in years, neither of them dreamed of running. The desert woke gentle that morning. No longer bruised, no longer hollow, just endless and alive. The dawn spilled across the cliffs like forgiveness, painting the red stone in quiet gold. The wind, once dry and bitter, moved softly now, brushing through the sage as if afraid to disturb the peace it had finally found. He stood outside the cabin, hat in hand, watching her hang a strip of cloth along the fence, blue, like the sky just before the sun breaks open. Her laughter drifted toward him, light as the dust that rose beneath their boots. The land hadn't changed much. Still wide. Still wild. But it no longer felt empty. He walked to her, handed her a cup of water. She smiled, that same quiet smile that had taught him what grace could look like without words. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The silence between them had become its own kind of prayer, the kind that asks for nothing and gives everything. Far off, the horizon shimmered, the same one that once promised only loss. Now it looked like home. He reached for her hand. She took it. Their shadows stretched long across the sand, joining as one shape beneath the waking sun. And when the wind rose again, soft, forgiving, familiar, it carried their laughter through the desert, across the broken riverbed, and into the wide forever that once forgot them. The desert still remembered pain. But now, it remembered love too.